Hello, everybody. First of all, let me apologize if you hear a little bit of like in the background right now. My walls in my place are like thin sheets of paper, babe. So my upstairs neighbor is showering right now. It's very loud, but he takes pretty quick showers, so don't worry. He'll be done. He'll be done very soon. Don't worry. I've noticed that. How is everybody doing? Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Absolutely Fried podcast. My name is Jezabelle, and this is kind of a place where we just get absolutely fried together and we yap absolutely way too fucking hard. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. Please don't forget to subscribe. If you're more of a listener than a viewer, just know that this podcast is available to you on every streaming platform. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Samsung, Amazon, you name it, it's there. Just search Absolutely Fried and it'll pop up. But you can also check the description for the links to that. Also, please don't forget to follow the podcast on Instagram at Absolutely Fried Podcast. How's everybody feeling today? I'm feeling, bitch, I want to say I feel good, but based on what the fuck we're going to talk about today, I don't feel so good. I do not feel so good. Today is different for me. I typically, y'all know I've been drinking on like some infused, like pre-made drinks, like in a can. But I'm kind of switching it up. I made like my own little cocktail, right? And then I just threw like, some syrup in it to infuse it. So we're going to see how this goes. But if it doesn't hit me within the time that I want it to hit me or feel the way that I want it to, I've got some candy with me that's like fast acting candy. So, hey, I'm prepared for today's episode, and I want to give you a heads up that you should be prepared for today's episode as well. How can I say this to you? Before anybody gets too committed to watching or listening to this episode wherever you're at, I do want to give a fair warning. Today's episode's going to be different. I recently did a bunch of research into something that's taken place in human history that I would love to discuss today. I am a big fan of going through, I love history. I love learning about human history because it's factual and it's things that have actually occurred. And I think that history is such an important thing to humanity, and it's important that we all educate ourselves on it because that's the only way that we learn not to do some fucking shit again. Because as you all know, history repeats itself, especially if we fucking ignore it. So it's very important that you educate yourself even on the things that might be extremely disturbing. So with that being said, history lessons with Jez. Today's episode is going to be, to put it very bluntly, extremely disturbing. This is not going to be a happy episode. This is going to be an educational one. And we're going to be diving into one of humanity's deepest, darkest, most disturbing thing that has ever taken place. So fair warning, if you are somebody that can't stomach stuff like that, if you are somebody that doesn't like to hear stuff like that, if you are not interested in things like that, then I'm going to recommend that you do not watch this episode. If at any point you have decided to watch this and you proceed, and if at any point you feel uncomfortable, I am going to recommend that you do click off, because in all honesty, as the episode progresses, it will get deeper and darker. So I just do want to give that fair warning. I'm going to give a couple of other warnings now too. And trust me, right now you may be thinking, Jezebel, this seems a little bit heavy. Like you're giving a lot of warnings here. Maybe you're being a bit excessive. I'm really not, especially with the next few warnings that I'm going to give. Although I do love learning about history and I do find darker history to be interesting, even this one was too dark for me, to be honest with you. So with that being said, I'm also going to give a warning that I'm not going to explicitly state the things that I discussed today, whether or not they were done to men, women, or children. Because even that I feel is a little bit too dark to dive into that deep of detail. If you would like to do your own research into this to find out about whether or not the things that I discuss happen to men, women, or children, you are more than welcome to. But I will not be discussing that detail. I also will be discussing very explicit things that are very deeply disturbing, but even so, I am not going to discuss everything that took place. There are some stuff that even I felt were very disgusting to learn about, to the point where I was like, I cannot even say this. Like, I read it and I had to walk away from my computer. I swear to you, I literally, like, I started having like a panic attack. I got up, I walked away from my computer, and I had to go and sit in my living room in silence for like 15 minutes and just breathe and drink water. So, like I said, if this piques your interest and you decide that you want to learn more about it, you have free will to go and do the research, but I want you to know that there are a lot of things that are very there's a level of disturbingness, I guess is the way to state it, that I will not be touching on. But I will still talk about some explicit things that I feel relay just how messed up this piece of history is. I still want you to get kind of a gist of that. So, all right. I hope we're all ready to dive into this, okay? Everybody take your sips. Everybody take your hits. The guy upstairs has finished showering, so I guess that means it's time to begin. Let's kind of start with what it is that we're going to be discussing today. So the thing that we're going to be discussing, and I just want to go ahead and apologize if you're watching me on YouTube, I'm referencing all the notes that I've been taking for like the past week. If you see me look down at my phone a lot. But I'm going to be discussing a piece of history that is known as Unit 731. And if you've heard of it, then I'm sure you already know how dark today is going to be. Now, I want to start with what piqued my interest in this. And what piqued my interest was I saw a video recently where this guy was very upset, got on social media, and he was like, have you guys heard what Japan is doing right now? Let me clarify. I researched what he said. I found no factual evidence of this. I found nothing online hinting that this was occurring, that this was a plan to occur, that I literally couldn't find anything. Like, this guy might just be online fear-mongering. So take what he said in this video very lightly, because I don't believe it to be true, because I couldn't find anybody else discussing it or anything online discussing it. But this guy got online and he made a video where he's like, I'm trying to make it so that the camera doesn't focus on the fucking Rudolph, but on my face. Hello? He gets online and he makes this video and he says, have you guys heard what's happening in Japan? He said that they just got approved to begin doing testing, like biological testing, where they are combining human and animal cells to create basically human animal hybrids. And the whole reasoning behind why they want to do this is because why he says they want to do this is because they want to create organs, so that they basically have a place to farm for organs for people who need organ donations or have issues. It's kind of for like a medical thing that he was saying was the reasoning behind it. And he was saying this is very scary, because we don't know like what territory we're treading into. There is a lot to do with just like morality here, as well as like what's going to happen with these things that they breed. Like, how are they going to feel? Are they going to be consciously aware? Then like religion factors play into this. So that was pretty much the whole video. And I was like, wow, that sounds terrifying. So I click on the comments, I go to read through the comments, and somebody brings up something called Unit 731, and they're like, just research into Unit 731. And I remember years ago vaguely hearing about something called Unit 731, but I never did a deep dive into it until this week. Unit 731, although his video I don't believe to be true, Unit 731 is very real. So let's just start from the very beginning. And the very beginning is, bitch, the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, that fucking far back. The beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We're taking it all the way the fuck back. So how do we start here? Back during this time, think about the very beginning times of the Industrial Revolution, which is like the 1600s of when it really started to begin. During this time, Japan was very closed off. It was kind of like their borders were closed. They didn't really like talk to anybody or do anything. They kind of just stuck to themselves, right? And it was mainly because they didn't want European influence to come into the country, because they saw what European influence was doing with other countries, and they were like, we don't want that here. After much convincing, they finally decide, we're going to open up our borders and let the Europeans in. So the Europeans come over to Japan, and they look around, and they're like, what the fuck? Dude, you guys are like 200 fucking years behind. They're seeing people walking around in robes. There's no pants. There's no shirts. There are people still behaving as if it is 200 years prior. Their weapons were swords, and that's where it ended. There weren't any bullets. There wasn't any actual like militia. Like it was just swords. And so Europeans come in and they're like, no, bud, let us introduce you to the Industrial Revolution. And so the Europeans come in and they give them everything they've got. They've like, this is a gun. We got bullets. We got this now. No more swords, babe. They introduced them to everything that they've been trading, everything that's been going on. They basically leveled Japan the fuck up. Now, the Europeans thought this was a great idea. Like, let's just all get on the same page with all the other countries, right? This was not a good idea. So, after the Europeans introduced Japan to the Industrial Revolution and to actual military weapons, Japan is like, well, fuck yeah, let's go ahead and organize. They start organizing a legitimate military. They start training. Japan is a hothead during this time. Japan wants to prove itself, right? So Japan decides, let's go to fucking war with China. That's what they decide. Now, to put this into perspective for you, China is astronomically larger than Japan. You can do your own research and chat. Like, just literally Google it right now, the difference between Japan and China. Bitch, it's massive. Japan is like this teeny tiny little island, right? Super teeny tiny. It's its own little entity. And China is a massive mainland, okay? Japan is like, let's go to fucking war with China. So they do. Surprisingly, they won. They beat the fuck out of China, actually, with no problem. Japan's feeling fucking great. They're like, hell yeah, we went to war with China and we beat them. They're starting to get a big head now, right? They're like, this is great. We're beginning to prove ourselves as one of the big dogs. So what happens now? Japan is like, well, you know what? I feel like a way that we could prove ourselves some more is by going to war with another big dog. So who do they choose? Russia. Now, Russia's got an actual military now, okay? Russia is also a hothead. Russia also wants to take over everything. Russia loves Russia and nothing else, okay? They're just like Japan. So Japan's like, if we're really going to prove ourselves, the best way to do this right now is to go to war with Russia. So they go to war with Russia. And what do you think happens? Japan wins. This one blew everyone's minds. Nobody expected them to win against Russia. This was ridiculous. Oh, shout out to Zero Frost for gifting us up. Thanks. This was very surprising to everybody, right? So at this point, Japan is like, okay, fuck yeah. Now that we are part of the big dogs, now that we've proven ourselves, we want the Westerners to respect us. And so for that, we want you to begin trading with us. Give us some big trades. Start treating us like how you treat everybody else. The thing is, like I said earlier, Japan's a teeny tiny little island. Westerners didn't really see what they would get out of there. You know, China had a lot to offer, right? Japan, not so much. But, you know, Japan is doing pretty well with their military, and I'm sure that they've got something that they could give us. So the Westerners turn around and they're like, okay, well, we'll trade with you a little bit. So they basically throw them crumbs. They do a little bit of trading with them. Japan don't like this. Japan feels as though it's being disrespected and is demanding that they get better fucking trades from the Westerners. At this point, after a couple of wars have occurred, the Geneva Convention takes place. And basically this passing is stating no chemical warfare. Chemical warfare is not fair for anybody, okay? It's very dangerous. It could wipe out an entire country. It's unfair. It could kill a bunch of people. It's very unsafe. That's not just about military anymore. That's just about quite literally wiping out entire races and countries of people. That's not war. That's worse. And morally, they're like, we're not going to allow this. So war tactic here, they put up a big red sign that's like, no chemical warfare. Pretty much everybody agrees to it, right? Everybody's like, yeah, we agree. Chemical warfare is pretty fucked up. You know, let's not do that, guys. Everyone's in agreement. Japan is not. Japan thinks that's fucking stupid. Japan is a hothead. Japan wants nothing but to prove itself during this time. It wants nothing but to be with the big dogs, but the big dogs aren't accepting them no matter how much they've proven themselves. They beat up China. They beat up Russia. Why aren't you accepting us? Fuck this shit. We don't fuck with none of y'all. That's basically what Japan is thinking. But Japan doesn't say this publicly. Japan expresses that they don't really agree with this, But Japan ultimately is like, we'll comply, right? But they lied. Japan wasn't going to comply. Instead, Japan decides, we're going to do this, but we're just going to do it quietly. We're going to do it in a way that they don't realize that we're doing it. And that kind of is the beginning of Unit 731. So what is Unit 731? Unit 731 is a way for them to use biological warfare. It's a place for them to test things out, basically. And by biological warfare, this is like not just chemicals like mustard gas. This is weaponizing diseases and infections. That's what it is. And what was the plan for Unit 731? Well, they wanted to focus on building these new biological warfare tactics. But the thing is, it's difficult to begin building warfare tactics like this without having a place to test the warfare tactics. So, Japan decides, well, we've beat China before. Let's go for it again. Japan begins attacking mainland China yet again, obviously winning. China keeps losing. Well, you're probably thinking, okay, Jezabelle, China's way larger, definitely got more people. Everyone was surprised by China losing. They were also ahead of Japan. Why does China keep losing? Well, the fact that China is so large actually works against China. China didn't have a set military, right? Or a set military base, or have bases everywhere and was protecting throughout the country. Like I said, it's a very large place. So instead it was kind of more like little pockets of people. Like, there's like some people here, there's some people there, some people over there. And so it's very easy actually to kind of come in and attack them because they're not really prepared. They don't have any kind of structure to their military yet. So it was very easy for Japan to come in and just take over. And that's kind of what happened. Japan's military was more solidified. So they come into mainland China and they start attacking them. At this point, as Japan is attacking mainland China, someone named Ishii, this is going to be a very popular name amongst what we talk about, and I would say the worst person amongst everything, because Ishii is kind of the beginning of all of this. So Ishii comes in and starts suggesting Japan needs to really start funding their chemical and biological warfare, right? And we're talking to, imagine a person goes up to a government that's already hotheads and just wants everything and just hates everybody else and just wants to take over. And he goes, hey, how about you start pouring money into these new warfare tactics that could totally take everybody out? Japan gets excited about this. And Ishii's like, the reason you want to do this is because you could continue your military growth before everyone else catches up with you. Because if people start to catch on to what you're doing, if people start to get to your point of military, they could easily wipe you out. Again, remember, you're a very small island. Yeah, you might pack a punch right now, but if the US decides to turn around, if Russia's been plotting on you, they could take you out. So Ishii's like, let's really start funding this chemical and biological warfare. Japan loves the idea. Japan is like, how come nobody has suggested this to us sooner? Fuck yeah. So Japan decides Ishii should become appointed head of Unit 731. At this time, Unit 731 wasn't publicly known as Unit 731, okay? Unit 731 was called, actually, the Army Epidemic Prevention Research Laboratory. What's that sound like to you? It sounds like preventative things. The way that they labeled it publicly was that they told the public that this is actually a laboratory that's meant for studying diseases that could possibly fall on their soldiers during warfare. And they want to make sure that they have cures for these diseases so that they can have fair wars amongst each other. So they're labeling it as, we're just looking for cures for these diseases to help our soldiers, actually. When in actuality, it's the complete and polar opposite. They're not looking for cures, babe. They're creating the diseases. They're looking for ways to spread the diseases. They're lying to the public and everyone else about it. That's what's happening. So, publicly known to just be a research into cures for diseases is where we're at. This lab that was created had a unit in China that was known as the Togo unit, and this is kind of the beginning of everything. The Togo unit that was part of the biological warfare research. Now, this unit was known as like a little fortress. Think of maybe like a small little county jail. That's about the size of it, right? It was a building about that size that they kind of gutted and put a bunch of cells into. Okay, so it started off as something smaller, just one building. Keep in mind, I didn't mention this before. I feel like it's kind of obvious, but maybe if you don't know about this time in history, this is something called Imperial Japan. This is very important to everything because it kind of is like what sets the tone for why all of this even took place. Okay, so Imperial Japan basically means that they were against anything that wasn't Imperial Japan. Basically, they viewed anything and anybody that wasn't Imperial Japan to be nothing. They thought of you as nothing more than an animal, nothing more than a bug, nothing more than a piece of wood that's in their way. They did not see you as human. If there was an imperialist here, basically a superiority complex here, they genuinely see themselves as better than everybody. Okay, that's what's happening here. They don't think that we matter. They see you as basically like a monkey, something to run tests on. They don't see you as anything, right? A bug to squash. That's what Imperial Japan was like. So, this fortress was converted into prison cells in Togo, and they would go out into mainland China after, taking over that area, and they would kidnap people. And they would bring them into this fortress. The people that first got there, they didn't know what was happening. It didn't come off as a bad place. This was a clean place, actually. They would get these people from mainland. They'd bring them in. They'd bust them in. They'd put them in these cells, yeah, but they'd feed them. They'd feed them. They'd bathe them. They'd take care of them. They treated them really well, actually. So if you're somebody that had gotten kidnapped and brought into this facility, you would probably just be thinking, I don't really know what's happening right now, but I guess we're probably just getting the butt end of the stick. There's a war going on right now, so maybe they're just kind of holding us as hostages. You wouldn't think that anything bad was taking place. This is just the beginning. They would bring people in. They would take care of them. They would get them to the most healthiest point. They wanted people who were healthy. They wanted you to be a good age. They wanted to make sure you had nothing wrong with you. They'd do a whole host of workup of like labs on you and make sure that you were in top-notch shape. And then that's when everything would begin. Once you were very healthy, they would begin tests. First starting with how the body behaves against things such as starvation, bleeding them out, or even dehydrating them, all over the course of several days to see how these people's bodies would react to this and what the results would be and how long they could survive like this. So they'd starve people for days on end and different amounts of starvation. Some people, they'd take away food completely. Some people, they'd take away a little bit at a time. They were testing on these people. They wanted to see, like, okay, how long can you last without food? How are you going to begin behaving? How is your body going to react to this? What is going to be the ultimate result of this? And they do the same thing with dehydration and the same thing with bleeding out. They would cut them or they'd drain them of their blood over the course of several days to see how long it was that they could last. You're probably thinking, wow, that's fucked up. Oh, it gets worse, babe, because that's only the beginning. They would then infect the people with different diseases at different stages of these tests. So there's layers to these tests. They're not just dehydrating these people. They're not just starving these people. They're not just bleeding these people out. They are also on top of this infecting them with things to see how the body also behaves with these infections. Because again, remember, this is for testing biological and chemical warfare. So they would test the disease at different stages of these tests, and then they would perform something called vivisection. Vivisection is basically the easiest way to explain it. Live dissection, as in you would be awake and they would dissect you. And they did this also at different stages of the test. So maybe they would infect you. A couple days later, they'd immediately cut into you to see how your organs are behaving. How are your organs looking? Are they also becoming infected? How is the entire inside of you working? They do that with people in the first beginning stages, the first few days. They may wait a couple weeks and then look in you. They may even close you up and come back to you if you're still alive. They may wait till you die and then go back inside and check you out. The whole thing that they wanted to do is they wanted to know step by step how these diseases are affecting people and how long these people can last with these diseases. You think that's bad? It gets worse. Now, at first, all of this was medical, right? All of this was medical. And I don't want to say I don't understand where they're coming from. But I guess if we're thinking in the terms of during the times that this was taking place, if we put ourselves in the shoes of an imperialist during this time, if we put ourselves in the shoes of people who are trying to develop war tactics, there's a goal in mind. And the goal in mind is that this is medical. We are infecting people with diseases. We are attempting to create new weapons. This is all very medical and they're doing their best to develop a weapon. So remember this, there's a goal in mind, a medical goal in mind, correct? Well, the government enjoyed the results so much. Again, it was medical. It was a research facility. Everybody that was performing these tests were actual medical professionals and doctors. That's what's taking place. Please keep that in mind. The government enjoyed the results so much and where things were heading that they decide, we're going to give you more funding. And not only are we going to give you more funding, but now we're going to give you access to military reserves. So now it's no longer just this one little tiny building that you're running medical labs and tests through. No. You can have access to an entire military reserve. Now, what the fuck does that look like? With more funding, Ishii's lab group is brought in as part of the actual government. So the government is now fully, they're aware of everything that's taking place, and the government is accepting of this. They decide to make this an actual section of the government, right? So the lab group is brought in as a part of the government and given a new name for the public. This new name is known as the Water Purification Group. This was the actual, real beginning of Unit 731. Everything I said before was kind of preface leading up to the start of this. But this right here is the beginning of what is known as Unit 731. Since they have access to military reserves, they were moved from this small little thing known as the fortress, this one little building in China, to a military reserve in China. Now, if you don't know what a military reserve is, this facility went from being one small building to now being over 2 square miles. 2 square miles for a research laboratory. Now, this place was extremely secretive because you're probably thinking, hey, how did nobody pick up on this? The Geneva Convention happened. They said that you can't do this shit. So how are they just getting away with this? Somebody has to be out there going and telling people. Somebody has to be out there running their mouth. Somebody has to have seen this. I mean, people are just getting kidnapped. And if you didn't get kidnapped, then maybe you're somebody who saw it and decided to go run and tell somebody. They hid this well. This military reserve was extremely secretive. They even had this 2 square mile reserve. In the very beginning of it was this massive building. Think hospital size. This massive building that was a welcoming building. As in, the public could see it. The public could even walk in. If you wanted to come and view this place, you could go and view it just to see what's going on. Because, obviously there's conspiracy theories. There's people running their mouth. There's people talking, whispers of things transpiring. There's possibilities. Well, go look at the Welcome Building. You could literally go in there. It's a clean, nice building. There's nothing going on in there. And so people started questioning, like, this Welcome Building, this is a really big reserve, though. How are they busting people in without people seeing that people are coming in? Well, here's the thing. There's the Welcome Building, but that's not where they were busting people in that they were kidnapping. They were busing them in through tunnels underground. So you could go into the Welcome Building all day long. You could sleep in there. You could spend an entire day in there with your eyes glued open and not blink once and still never see a thing, because it's all taking place under your feet. This large facility is in the middle of nowhere and shuttling in over tens of thousands of people from mainland China. How did they get away with it? You've got a large facility in the middle of nowhere. That's for research purposes. This definitely raised questions. So people start asking, why did you choose the middle of nowhere for your facility? Japan responds and they say, well, it's also combined with a lumber facility. We process lumber through here. And everyone believed them. They got away with it. They told them, yeah, we just kind of combined our research lab with also a lumber facility. And everyone's like, well, processing lumber in the middle of nowhere makes sense. That's where the trees are. Okay. Nobody bat an eye. I want to mention this took place for decades before anything happened. They got away with this. They stuck to this lie so well that they even started referring to the people that they were running tests on as Maruta. Maruta is Japanese for logs. And so when they would talk about the people they were experimenting on, they wouldn't call them patients. They wouldn't call them people, not even humans. They were referred to as logs. So the way that they would talk about it would be, how are the logs looking today? How's the log testing going? How long did the logs last today? It was almost as if it was a running joke within the facility. These weren't people, they were just pieces of wood. How's the testing going? How well did the logs last? This is the type of conversation that's happening in this facility. And nobody even knows. Like I said, you could stand in the Welcome Building all day long. They'd be talking about it around you and you wouldn't even know. Japan would even post their findings that they got from these tests. They would publicly post their research findings because they had to. This is a public research lab. They have to post their findings. But the thing was, they would claim that their testing was done on long-tailed primates, not humans. Long-tailed primates, and would even double down, actually, and say that they were, now I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Manchurian monkeys is what they would specifically say they were. So again, not humans, monkeys. That's what these people were referred to as. These people that were from mainland China, I'm sure you've heard me say that quite a few times, and you're probably thinking, Jezabelle, how come you don't just say Chinese people? Because it wasn't. It was not only Chinese people that were ending up in this facility. It was just people from mainland China. And so this means that it encompassed not only Chinese people, but Mongolians, Koreans, and even Japanese criminals. They even had Russians in there. So this is crazy because earlier I said Imperial Japan saw everyone else as dirt, but they saw other Imperial Japan people as the only humans to exist, basically. But they've turned around and now they've got Japanese people in here. They were just sending anybody in there at this point. So, when they kidnapped these people, how did they get them to the facility? They'd kidnap these people and they'd throw them into a van that had absolutely no windows. So the people are being bussed in the back of these vans where they can't see anything. It's pitch black in there, right? They bring these people to the tunnels where they then open up the doors and bag the people and take them into the tunnels. Now they did this with the purpose of, if for any reason, any possible chance in life that they were able to escape in some way, or if they got busted these people that were in the facility couldn't snitch. They had no idea where the facility is. They have no idea where they were taken. They don't even know where these tests were occurring. There's no possible way for these people, if they had survived, to turn around and snitch. That was the purpose of it. When they got there, these people would get bussed in, and they would give them what they told them was a vaccine. Now, remember, in the very beginning, when they went to the fortress, they were well taken care of. Not anymore. Things are starting to get darker now. They're no longer medical professionals taking these people in, getting them healthy, and then testing them, right? That was bad enough. These people, the second that they get there, they immediately infect them with diseases. No longer care. The second they get in, they just get lied to. Hey, we're going to give you this vaccine to just help you out just in case you've got anything going on. No, they infect them with, whether it be the bubonic plague. During this time, the bubonic plague was huge. So they'd infect them with bubonic plague. That was the biggest thing that they did. The amount of people that were tested on or died in the facility is unknown. I want to mention that. How I said before that if for any reason these people were able to get out and wanted to snitch on what was taking place, they couldn't. Not only could they not because of the fact that they had absolutely no clue where the facility was, but because not a single person survived. Anybody that was brought into this facility that was meant to be a test subject didn't survive. Not one singular person. Anybody who went in never came out. And so nobody knows what the death rate is. Nobody knows how many people died. Nobody. Well, the people that know are the people that committed the crimes, that were heinous in this way. The people who performed the stuff, those are the only people that know. But the estimate could be anywhere from 3,000 to 50,000. That's how very little we know about this facility. The average lifespan for anybody who entered into this facility was about 2 months, and that's if they were lucky. And I'm just going to go ahead and elaborate a little bit more for you. It's actually closer to about a couple days to max a week. But the reason why the span average is 2 months is because there were people that were brought in that were specifically there for breeding reasons. And so that's why the average is kind of skewed to 2 months, actually. But unless you were brought in there for that, you clocked out within a week, max. If you were lucky, and I hate to even use these words, but it's honestly the best way to describe it. If you were lucky, they used physical warfare tactics on you. And yeah, at this point, it's no longer about medical. It's no longer about biological. It's no longer about chemical. At this point, they're just testing everything. If you were lucky, you had physical weapons tested on you. So what does this mean? Examples of this would be they would take people and they'd put them in a circle. A bunch of people, they'd put them in a circle and they'd throw a grenade into the middle of the circle. And they'd keep doing this and making the circle larger and putting people at different distances to test how far, what is the span, what's the reach of this grenade for it to kill people. That's what they were trying to figure out. Not only would they test that, but they would also test flamethrowers. They would put people at different distances and test the flamethrowers. Then, not only distances, but they would also test how long does it take to burn somebody with a flamethrower until they no longer are alive. They would even test penetration capability of bullets. So at different distances, they would take shots at people and see, is it going to go right through them? Is it going to kill them? Is it going to, where is this going to go? So they're running just different tests on physical weapons, even down to how sharp a knife needs to be in order to penetrate you, in order to kill you, in order to slice you. They are running tests on every single weapon. Again, at this point, What happened to the goal? The goal is no longer there. This began with doctors and medical professionals, and now you just have military personnel just torturing people, testing things that you don't need to be testing. A bullet goes through somebody. You shoot a bullet, it's going through somebody. Why do they need to test that? Just pure and utter torture at this point is what it's seeming like. Outside of the facility, because at this point, as I've said just now, the goal is gone. They then begin testing in mainland China as well. And how do they do this? Well, they would infect mainland China with different diseases to test their warfare tactics. So they would infect fleas with typhoid disease or the bubonic plague. And it was so simple the way that they did it. They'd infect them, put them in a clay pot, and then just toss it into the middle of the square, in the middle of a city. They would just toss it there and then just let them hop around and go and infect everybody. They'd do that, or they'd infect the waters with the bubonic plague or typhoid disease. And they'd give it some time. They'd watch from a distance and observe what happens to these cities of people. And these are tens of thousands of people. Now, I mentioned earlier that the amount of people that died within the facility was anywhere between 3 to 50,000. That's not taking into account the people that died just in mainland China from these biological and chemical warfare testing tactics. That's not including them, because it's tens of thousands of people that died from this. They would infect these cities, watch and observe from a distance, and then they would go in these medical like garbs and just count how many people are dead, how many people are alive, how many people survived. What are the people looking like right now? That's it. They'd go in and they would just count. It was all data for them. These weren't people. It's all data. They would, another thing that they would test was mustard gas. And they would take people and they'd tie them up. And at different distances, they'd spray mustard gas at them. How much mustard gas does it take for these people to die? How close do we need to be? This is where it starts getting kind of bad. Because I'm sure you're thinking already the things that I was talking about already are crazy. And you're like, Jezabelle, this is probably the worst piece of history I've already heard. At this point, I'm kind of just going to be going through a list of things that kind of took place there. And this one is, they attempted infecting people with STDs. And after they would infect people with STDs, they would vivisect them, how I said earlier, which is them cutting into people while they are alive. So they'd infect them with these STDs, and at different stages, they would come back and they'd cut them open to see, all right, how is it infecting your organs? What's going on in there? What's the process going on in there? These people who were infected with STDs, I want you guys to know, it didn't always stick. You know, they'd attempt to infect somebody with an STD and it didn't always work. So instead, what they would do at this point was they would take two people, one person that has an STD and one person that doesn't, and at gunpoint would force them to infect the other person. Do what you will with that information as to how that was done. This all sounds very awful. And at this point, I think that we can all agree that they have fully and completely lost and abandoned the original goal, which was creating warfare tactics. At this point, it's just very medieval, very torturous is what it comes off as. Where are the doctors? They're kind of non-existent at this point. It's just people doing whatever they wanted. Now, as we get into the things that I'm about to discuss right now, I want to say the things that I'm going to discuss are things that there are records of. There are things that took place that we don't know about and we never will know about. And you'll find out soon why. but I'm going to go over what it is that we have record of. And again, this isn't everything because I've decided to redact some things that I just don't feel comfortable discussing. And if you would like to do your own research and go and find out the things that I have chosen to not speak on, you are more than welcome to. There are plenty of videos out there that are very educational. There are plenty of articles. There's even books about this, actually. So if you find that you're interested in finding out more information, you are more than welcome to do the research. For one, people were cut open while awake, and they would have various organs removed. Then they would stitch them back up and see, all right, how long can you survive without this? For example, they'd take out their GI tract or some shit, take out their stomach, and they'd see, could you live without this? Do you need this? You think that's bad? Sometimes they would remove an organ and they'd put it where they want to. For example, attaching the esophagus directly to the stomach. Take the stomach, move it all the way the fuck up here into the chest cavity. Sew them back up. How are you going to behave now? How long can you live like this? Does this work? Not seeing where the biological and chemical warfare tests how this correlates. They were just cutting people up to cut them up. They would also cut people's limbs off and see how long they could live without them. And then sometimes they would cut the limbs and they would switch them. They would just completely swap the limbs to see if the body would be capable of reattaching itself. They might put an arm where a leg is, swap the arms around, take a leg, put a leg somewhere else, just to see what would happen. People, oh, this one is so disgusting. This one is literally so disgusting. I don't even want to say it, but like I said, these things are all bad, but I feel like I want to express to you that it gets much worse than what it is that I've discussed. People were placed in pressure chambers where they would change the amount of pressure in the chamber to see how long it would take for the person to implode, for things to start popping out of the person. People were hung upside down to see how long it would take for them to pass away from the blood rushing to their head. And that just thinking about that makes me so sick. Because have y'all ever sat on the edge of your bed and just kind of like dangled backwards off of it? You can feel the blood rushing to your head. Now imagine you're tied up by your feet and it's rushing to your head. And you're just stuck there. People would have large objects like crates dropped on them to see how much force or weight it would take to be killed by being crushed. People were placed in large centrifuges and they would speed them up, like ramp the speed up, to see how much G-force it would take to kill somebody. People were injected with random liquids, such as horse blood or seawater, to see how the bodies reacted. See what would happen, just to see what would happen. Limbs were placed in freezing cold water until they were frozen and, quote unquote, literal quotation from somebody who performed these tests, as hard as wood, at which point they would crush it to see how the limb behaved to being frozen solid and then smashed. Sometimes they would take these things that they've frozen, these people that they've frozen, and attempt to reheat them to see if they could bring them back to life. See if they could bring these limbs back to life. Can they put life back into these things now? Could the limb be saved? They would take people and they would mummify them to death. And you're probably like, well, how would they do that? They would place them in these extremely hot rooms with hot fans, these fans blowing hot air at them, right? They would just lock them in there and just leave them in there. And these people would sweat out every little drop of water that they had to the point of mummification. And this led them to discover that somebody who has been mummified weighs 1/5 of what they weighed prior to being dehydrated in this way. I don't want to say that this is a friendly interaction, but this is known as, if you were to do research into this and read what's written about Unit 731, there's an account of a staff member that was part of 731 who this account is known as a quote unquote friendly interaction. The fact that this is labeled friendly is insane, but in comparison to everything that's transpiring, it's seen as a friendly interaction. The interaction was with a staff member of 731. He's doing his rounds and he goes by a cell that had 2 girls in it. One girl was 19 years old and one was 21 years old. 19-year-old is a girl from Ukraine. And the Ukraine girl tells the staff member, she's like, please, we haven't seen ourselves in a mirror since the day that we got here. Could you please, begging this man to give them a mirror so they could look at themselves. And this staff member turns around and he sneaks a mirror into the facility and he passes it to them through this hole that's in the wall. And to me, hearing that story was crazy, because can you imagine? Think about how often we just look in the mirror. We look at ourselves. It's very normal for somebody to pull out their phone and just look at their camera, to just look at themselves. There's little things that we take for granted that we don't even realize that we do. And I'm not egging on you guys oh, you're taking shit for granted. It's more that I just want you to think in the perspective of things that you casually do that these people can no longer do. Now, back then, technology wasn't a huge thing. They didn't have phones or computers or anything like that. So looking in the mirror was probably very advanced for them. So to not be able to look at yourself. Think about how long it would take for you to forget what you looked like. I think that if I didn't look in the mirror for just a few days, I'd probably forget what I look like. Shit, there's times where I swear to you, I look at myself in the mirror all the time, and there's times where I'm like, I do not remember what I look like. I'm gonna look in the mirror. So can you imagine genuinely not being able to see yourself to the point where you actually do not recall what your features are? How you look. These people weren't just physically tortured. They are mentally being tortured as well. I think what makes hearing that story so sad is that this all began as chemical and biological warfare. There was a goal in mind, right? And the people who took part in these heinous crimes and these disgusting acts were just behaving in what the government told them to do. Like I said, this was Imperial Japan. So all of these imperialists, these people, they believe you're nothing. You are an animal, you are a bug, you are nothing, right? So to them, you getting tortured means absolutely nothing. They're laying their head down at night and they're sleeping perfectly fine because they don't think that you're human. But this interaction is proof that there were people who saw these other people as, well, people. They saw them as human. This staff member saw these 2 girls and they were humans to him. They weren't just nothing. So to know that he saw that, to know that for a fact he's not the only one, to know that he saw that and still continued working and allowing these things to take place is very scary. Very scary. Now, you're probably wondering the goal of this. They spent all this time, like I said, this took place for decades. Oh, we finished the drink. If you're wondering, I do feel it. I started feeling it early on. They did try to do something with the information that they gathered. Now, like I said back then, Japan was a hothead. Japan wanted nothing but to prove itself as one of the superior or elites. And so, in actuality, the goal in mind with Unit 731 wasn't to take over China, wasn't to take over Russia. It was actually to take over the US. That was the goal. And they had plans too. It was known as Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night. And they planned to do this on, I don't remember the exact day, but it was at some time in February. But exactly 1 month before their planned attack on the US is when the US bombed Japan, ultimately ending the war. And it's crazy to know that if we hadn't bombed them, there is a chance that history would have played out very differently. And in all honesty, it's all thanks to them. Like I said, they're hotheads. They got a little bit too slap happy and they bombed Pearl Harbor. The US was not going to take that shit. They fucking bombed Pearl Harbor. In all honesty, if they had just stuck to their original plan, who knows how history would have played out. Things would look a lot different. But the plan for Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night was to release the bubonic plague on San Francisco. That was the entire operation. They didn't do it. Thank God. After this, Japan knew once they'd been beat down like that, they were like, okay, oh shit, the US is now interfering and coming after us. After this, Japan knew that the war courts were not going to be happy with what was transpiring. Okay? So Japan is like, we got to get rid of everything. So remember earlier when I said to you that nobody who walked in there and was a patient in Unit 731 ever got out? Not a single person? It's because once that took place, Japan went in and they forced every single patient to take poison or to be shot. Those were your options. You take poison or you get shot. And then after they'd done that, they burned the entire facility down along with all of the documents. All of it. So that's also what I meant when I said in the beginning of this episode where I was like, hey, this is only what we have on record. And only what we have on record are what the people who were in these research facilities decided to tell us. And what's crazy to me is, let's be honest with each other now. If you are somebody who's part of this research facility and you're scared that something's going to happen to you, that the US or that the war courts are not going to be happy about this, you're going to come clean about some stuff, but you're not going to tell the whole story. They burned down an entire facility and then came clean. There's stuff that they didn't tell us. And to know that there's worse things that occurred that we will just never know about, because the only people that are alive to tell the story are the people who performed the acts. None of the people who went through them. The United States, after all of this, after the burning down, come to Japan. And when they got there, they heard whispers about human experimentation and tracked down Ishii along with other researchers, and they asked them about all these whispers that they're hearing of all these people saying human experimentation. Well, Ishii actually admitted that there was human experimentation to a certain degree. Now, he didn't admit to the heinous acts that took place, but he admitted, yeah, there was a little bit. There was a little bit that transpired, but nowhere near what people were whispering about. And so the US is like, you know what? We're going to go look at that place that you decided to burn down. And if we find that any of the remnants go against any of what the US deems as proper war tactics, I guess, we're not going to try you in a US tribunal. We're going to hand you over to Russia, and they're going to be the ones to try you. Now, the thing is, they gave this ultimatum to them because at this time, Russia takes war tribunals very seriously. And the way that the US works is you come clean and you get a prison sentence. That's what happens. Oh, you did this? Well, you're going to go to prison for life. That's what you get. Versus Russia, you did this? You broke war laws? Rope. That's what happens. No ifs, ands, or buts. You get the rope. So, obviously, with that with those two choices, the US strikes up a deal with Ishii and the researchers. The thing was, they gave this ultimatum, but in actuality, they were never going to let Russia have them anyway. Because the thing was, the US knew that if Russia got their hands on these researchers, even if they decided to rope them, Russia would have all the research data. And the US knows that it wouldn't use any of this data because it's not going to perform any of the biological warfare tactics, but they don't know if Russia won't. So the US actually strikes up an entire deal with Ishii and the researchers. And the US tells them, okay, look, we'll give you full immunity. That probably just blew your mind. You're probably thinking, excuse me, full immunity on everything? What happened to the prison sentence? Here's the thing. During this time, when they admitted to things and they were being tried by the US, they didn't admit to everything. At this point, the heinous crimes that took place, the deep human experimentation that took place, they didn't admit to yet. They kind of just surface leveled it. And so at this point, the US is thinking, okay, this is bad, but it's nowhere near what anyone was saying. So full immunity. I say that because I think we'd all like to believe that if the US knew about what actually took place at this point, that they wouldn't have just let them off with immunity. I think we'd all like to think that. So, in exchange for full immunity, Ishii and the researchers just had to turn over all of the data that they had. That's it. Whatever documentation was left and whatever it was that they knew, they just had to turn over all of the data and the research to the US. They agreed to this deal. Here's the part where it gets a little bit crazy, because I think when I started this, I said to you guys that I don't even know if I said this. I can't even remember if I said this to you, but this is very new information. This took place dating all the way back. Like I said, it kind of started with the Industrial Revolution, and then all of this kind of took place in the early 1900s. Like I said, there was us bombing Japan, so I'm sure you could understand this was during World War II. But this information didn't even go public until the 90s. Yep. That large of a gap of time before anybody even knew about what took place. Up until the 90s, it was a conspiracy theory. Unit 731 was a conspiracy theory, actually. And then it wasn't globally known by everyone until the early 2000s. Yep. The early 2000s. They hid this from us. And it's because the US had agreed that one of the things that they agreed to that was in this immunity deal was that the US would hide the information and also push it as a conspiracy theory to allow these men who had full immunity to change their names and move somewhere else. So we don't know where these people are at. I think that there's documentation that Ishii died in 1959 from cancer, but there could be researchers still out there. There could be somebody still out there that's alive, and we wouldn't know. So at this point, it was just conspiracy theories surrounding a place that wasn't known as Unit 731, mind you. It was known as the Water Purification and Lumber. That's what it was known as. And so it was just conspiracies surrounding this. Well, around 1950, Russia actually ended up finding out about everything. And Russia decides that they're going to hold their own trial for these people. So Russia goes out, and they got their hands on 12 researchers that worked in this place. And like I said before, for something like this, you would think that Russia's gonna rope these people, right? That's what's gonna happen. But Russia didn't. Considering everything that we just discussed and how serious Russia takes war crimes, you would think Russia is going to give these people the rope. No, actually, Russia sentenced them to somewhere between 2 to 20 years in a labor camp. And the max that anybody served was actually 7 years. 2 to 7 years is what these people served. It's better than what the US did, but Still confusing. We don't know why that is. There is theories that the reason they got such a light sentence was that those researchers handed over information to Russia. That's the only thing that we can think of. That's it. And that's very believable. So, in the 90s, when this became public information, it became public information because Japan's government finally admitted to Unit 731. But the thing was, they still never admitted to the specifics of what took place or what the researchers did. They just admitted that there was things that took place and Unit 731 did exist. So they basically said, it's not a conspiracy theory, but they didn't give specifics. Obviously, a country's government wouldn't want to tell you, yeah, we turned around and fucking just were torturing people. But the newest information, like I said, the early 2000s is when this first came out. Well, there's still information coming out. And I'm sure that as the years progress, there will probably be more information that comes out. Like I said, this is still very unknown to us. But as of 2018, the newest information that came out was the Japanese government in 2018 released the 3,607 researchers' names, but all of them are either dead or disappeared. That's it. That is the extent of our knowledge of this. There's somebody out there that knows, and hell, probably even our governments have more information than they've allowed us to have access to, because that's how it always works. The government turns around and they give you crumbs. They give you bits and pieces when they feel like giving it to you. That's why you have some stuff that got, first of all, you have the entire debacle that took place. Then they hid it from everybody, allowed a conspiracy theory to fester. Then in the 90s, it comes out to the public. And then in the early 2000s, it comes out globally. And then in 2018, they released the researchers' names. There's a lot more that we don't know. And like I said, there's stuff in here that I didn't discuss that's a lot worse that took place, but I just didn't feel that there was a reason to get that dark and disturbing in this episode. I feel like what I discussed is enough for you to understand just how insane and intense this disturbing piece of history is. And it's known to be the worst example of human experimentation in human history, which is insane. Learning about this, I have to tell you, was very intense for me. Like I said, there was a point where I had to step away from my computer and literally go and just sit upstairs on my couch. And I'm not joking when I tell you I was having a full panic attack. I was disassociated and everything. I'm looking around my living room what the fuck did I just read? That's insane. Because like I said, I redacted whether or not what I discussed happened to men, women, or children. But I'm sure you can guess just how bad these get. And with the fact that they burned all of the documentation, it's crazy to know that they publicly came forward with this. And it's the fact that there's most definitely worse stuff that's taken place. But like I said, it's very important to learn this history. I think that it's not smart to avoid these things. I think that it is better for us to educate ourselves and be disgusted by it. We should be disgusted by it because it's terrible. And the only way that we can make sure that it doesn't happen again is if we educate ourselves on it. If the whole world ignores it, then guess what they'll do? They'll do it again. Not Japan. Somebody might, though. Somebody out there might. And that's why you can't ignore history. It is better to educate yourself and be aware. This episode was intense, y'all. Holy shit. I'm sweating. I can't lie to you. Y'all, I'm not joking when I say that before I press start streaming, I literally sat here for about maybe 30 minutes, trying to get myself to push start streaming, because I was just y'all, this is going to be an intense one. I hope that you guys enjoyed learning about this. The people who stuck around, even though this was a deeply disturbing one, the people who stuck around, I know that this was a lot of information to digest, and it was definitely probably rough on you to hear. But I'm very happy that I was able to be the one to educate you on this if you have never even heard of this before. I hope that you enjoyed becoming educated on it. Like I said, this wasn't going to be a funny, uplifting episode. This was going to be more of an educational one. If you just got here, this was a super intense episode. I'm going to be uploading this on YouTube, so if you've missed out, don't worry, this is going to be up on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, babe, I hope that you're okay. The people on YouTube, they have it better because they're able to pause and just walk away for a second and come back to it, right? A lot of my information I got here, I just did from a lot of research online on Google and just reading different things. Like I said, there's a whole book out there if you're interested. And there's a couple videos on YouTube that do a huge deep dive into it. I watched some of like a 45-minute video as well. So definitely if you want, they didn't redact information. I did. If you want an even deeper dive, it's out there. I hope that you guys enjoy. And Professor Jez, somebody called me Professor Jez. I want to say that I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me. I do hope that you enjoyed. I hope this wasn't too freaky for you, but I enjoyed learning about this and I really wanted to relay the information to you. This is stuff that I do all the time. So if you guys want to hear more about like other things that I research into, I'm always doing this. I'm always trying to learn about new things. That's life. But I love you guys so much. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your night. I know, like I said, this was a disturbing episode, so take some time to wind down and relax a bit and bring yourself back down to earth and understand that you are okay and we are safe right now, okay? All right, I love you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your night. It's going to be a great night. I hope you sleep very well, and I hope you wake up feeling great because tomorrow's going to be a great day, and then you're going to see me on Friday, and it'll be better. Okay, love you guys. Good night.